Hi, everybody. Today's Tuesday, December 9th, 2025, and our dear friend, our great friend, Wilkerson, is here with us. Welcome back.
Good to see you, Nima.
Please subscribe and hit like button, helping us reaching more people. And Larry, let me start with the case of Ukraine.
Can
We
I
know
start?
that,
Can I start with a question?
yeah,
Has Lula da Silva been overthrown yet?
no, not
Good.
yet.
I can mark that one up. One against Marco Rubio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me start, Larry. Let's talk about what's going on with the case of Ukraine. And we know that there was a meeting in the United Kingdom. All these Europeans, not all of them, they didn't invite Poland to be part of the meeting, but we know that the United Kingdom, Germany, and France, they were talking about how to deal with the war in Ukraine. And today we've learned from the Telegraph, they're saying that the Trump's Ukraine peace deal on the brink of collapse. There is something going on in Europe, and here is what Merz said, Larry.
Doubt on our support for Ukraine, and this is what we are firmly standing behind, and the outcome is open. I'm skeptical about some of the details which we are seeing in the documents coming from U.S. side, but we have to talk about that. That's why we are here. Thank you for your invitation.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the reason that the Telegraph pointed out that it's collapsing, it seems that Zelensky doesn't agree to cede territory to Russia. That's how do you find this situation with Europeans together with Zelensky?
I think they're fighting a rearguard action against a fait accompli. And I think it's very dangerous what they're doing because they are going to leave themselves in a position. And let me qualify that by saying we're really talking about Merz, Macron, and Starmer here, but others too, like the Secretary General Mark Rutte. They're going to leave themselves no ground to fall back on when it collapses completely. Now, maybe that's going to be a positive. I would think that it would be a negative, but it might be a positive because if these people leave the scene even more precipitously than I think they're going to leave, that is to say they're voted out of office, formally voted out of office, within the next, let's say before or right after Christmas, then it doesn't matter really because the people will have spoken in whatever way they can in Germany, France, Great Britain, and elsewhere too, as Holland did. And they will have said, we don't want you guys anymore. It is mainly guys. There are a few women in there. We don't want you anymore. You're talking about spending 5% of our money on war, on armaments and defense, your euphemism for all this stuff. We don't like that. We don't like it. We like the social systems we have. We like the healthcare. We like the education. We like the good roads. We like all the things we have. While we Danes are voted the happiest people in the world every year or every other year, we don't want that to change. So these people are going to be voted out. But they can do, like a dying elephant can thrash a lot of grass, they can do damage before they leave. And I hope it's minimal. I hope it's just damage to themselves, particularly these three characters, Merz, Starmer, and Macron, because they are lousy, lousy European leaders.
Yeah. Here is, Larry, what Donald Trump said about the peace proposal, his peace proposal.
Responsible for the stalled progress, or what's going on there?
Well, he's got to read the proposal. He hadn't he hasn't read
the
it
most
yet.
recent draft.
That's as of yesterday. And maybe he's read it over the night. It would be nice if he would read it. You know, a lot of people are dying, so it would be really good if he'd read it. His people loved the proposal. They really liked it. His lieutenants, his top people, they liked it. But they said he hasn't read it yet. I think he should find time to read it.
Yeah. His people, I don't know who's...
This is the man, Nima. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I got to say that this is the man who on 3 December, to a question from the press, said essentially, of course, we will show you that video of the 2 September attack. Yes, we'll show it to you. And then 5 days later, another reporter said, where's the video? We haven't seen it. You said you would show it. I didn't do that. You're lying. Who is she? Turned to one of his people and said, get rid of her. This is the same man. So what does anything he says mean at any given time?
Because when he's talking about his people, Zelensky's people, I would assume he's talking about, Umerov. He's talking about Sersky, the head of army. I don't see those people agreeing on, what Donald Trump is talking about.
One wonders whom he's talking with, and you don't know because he picks who he talks with. Not Witkoff or Marco Rubio or whomever. He picks who he talks with, and generally he picks someone he knows he's going to hear something that's favorable from. Not all the time, but most of the time. He doesn't have a choice sometimes when he has to talk to the actual leader. I don't think he's inclined to talk to Zelensky at all here now, though. I'm assuming, he never said the name in there, but I'm assuming the person he was talking about that hadn't read it was Volodymyr Zelensky. Hadn't read the deal. Well, I bet he has. I bet he threw it on the floor after the first page.
But it wasn't that,
He's not running things anymore, I don't think. I think the underneath layer that is getting ready to oust him is increasingly taking over things. And I don't give him much longer.
They, after the meeting, they have announced, Europeans together with Zelensky, that they come up with a counter proposal supported by Europe. And they're going to send it to the United States today. It seems as the Telegraph reported on that. And you assume if Zelensky is not going to, to accept this territorial reality of Ukraine, the eastern part of Ukraine, so there is no deal anymore. And Europeans, doesn't seem that Europeans would put any pressure on Zelensky. And I don't know how Donald Trump can deal with that.
Well, the next step that's going to come up is Donald Trump's going to ignore everybody. I know what he did before. I know he went and talked to the Europeans after he'd said what he said after the Alaska summit. And the Europeans apparently talked him into doing something differently. And now he's back on the original track, I think, as is Putin. And Donald Trump is so mercurial that you never know what he's going to do at any given moment. But I think this time he's just apt to turn his back on the Europeans. He's just apt to say, for example, now this would be worst case, but he's just apt to say, go to hell, Zelensky, go to hell, Macron, Starmer, Merz, all you guys, I'm out of here. You can deal with it. And here's the thing that you're talking about. You're talking about money from the United States for arms to go to Europe, who has no money to pay for them, for arms to go to Ukraine, who has no soldiers to use them. This is preposterous. And the Europeans are just being obstinately stupid. Now, that's not a new position for Europeans to assume, not of late anyway. But he could just say, I'm out of here. I'm done. Putin, do what you have to do. Finish it. What are the Europeans going to do? Start a war with Putin? He's already told them what that'll mean. He's already told them what that'll mean. And they can't muster a single solitary army corps. Putin's got about 7 or 8 on the front lines. They can't muster the air defenses. They can't muster the drones. They can't muster anything that Putin is now totally replete with. If they start a war with him, they'll be destroyed. And guess what? NATO's not going to work in terms of the United States coming in, not with Donald Trump at the helm. So they're playing a very dangerous game here. It's a desperate game they're playing. And it's dumb. It's stupid, dangerous.
And something, the division between Europe and the United States in Ukraine somehow was addressed in the new document, National Security Strategy of the Trump administration, Larry.
Take that, Europe. Take that. Only it isn't what it is. You have to read that thing very, very closely. What it is it's a statement that we're going to retrench into our own hemisphere so we can fight China better.
Yeah. I don't know who. I remember when Olaf Scholz was in power in Germany, we were thinking, who's this guy? Why is he behaving this way? And today with Merz, it's unbelievably worse. You know, Germany, Bloomberg reported that Germany is going to allocate a record 52 billion for the purchase of weapons for Ukraine. These guys are literally just selling out Germany for the sake of their hatred toward Russia.
You're right. And who are they going to give the weapons to? Ukraine is running out, if not almost totally out of soldiers to whom to give the weapons. So whom are they going to give them to? This is crazy. I mean, okay, Starmer, where are the German legions you're going to send into Ukraine? God forbid that you had them and sent them. Okay, France, where are the legions you're going to send into Ukraine? God forbid that you had them and sent them either. Where's anybody's legions? Britain can't even sail its navy. It doesn't have enough sailors to put on its ships. These people are weaklings talking as if they had the United States totally and utterly behind them. And I got news for them. The United States is not powerful enough either, except in one component, nuclear weapons. Yeah. We are so far behind right now, Nima, and I just looked at the list this morning, in giving our allies, signatory allies, treaty allies, the weapons we've promised them, from Taiwan to Japan to whomever you want to mention. We're so far behind, and we're not giving ourselves these weapons either. And that's first priority, or at least it's supposed to be. Who's the giant in all of this? In the immediate sense of Ukraine, Russia is the giant. With all the tickets punched, all the clocks running on time, good solid economy, good defense industrial base, all these lies that people in this country are telling, they're dangerous lies, because you get people convinced that there's a different situation you have to confront than the real situation. I think at least Trump is aware of some of this. And that's one reason he wants to get out of this. Not least, of course, is because he remembers what Sergei Lavrov, I think it was, said to Marco Rubio in Riyadh about losing $300 billion annually because of Russia and the United States not having a sound economic relationship. He wants to restore that. He wants to go over their head if he has to, and he will go over their head and step on their feet with track shoes if he has to, I think. And he'll step on Zelensky in a heartbeat.
Considering the new document, NSS, National Security Strategy, Larry, what is your understanding of NATO? What is important in terms of, the policies in Ukraine? We know that Donald Trump is trying to somehow, move the burden and put it on the shoulders of Europeans. But after all, considering NATO and the future of NATO, what is the message?
The message is very clear, I think. It's that we're going to take this reorientation that's more intended for his MAGA base than anyone else. Anyone else wants to sign up it, that's fine too. But what he's saying is we're going to do all this that focuses on the Western Hemisphere when it's all just camouflage for the fact that we are doing that, not to protect Europe, not to even protect our other allies. We're doing that so our other allies can join us, like Japan, Korea, and so forth, in attacking China, in going after China, in standing up to China, in reversing the situation which is happening right now, even as I speak, where China is taking over everything. China has the best economy in the world, the largest economy in the world. It has the biggest Navy, the biggest Air Force, the biggest military on the ground. It has the most capable defense industrial base in the world. Russia probably the second most capable. And now it is at least titularly allied with Russia. we have got to do something about that, we think, and we think we've got to do it sooner rather than later. And the best way to do that is to, if you will, come home in a certain respect, though we're not really doing that if you look at base closures and things like that, and new bases going up on European bases, other things that we're doing. The wall we're building out in the Pacific on the island chain that we used in World War II, all this is aimed at China. And the real focus on this hemisphere, our hemisphere, your and my hemisphere, the Western hemisphere, the real focus on South America and Latin America in general, but particularly South America, is because Putin has already in 2024 shown the Monroe Doctrine to be feckless. When he sent Admiral Gorshkov to Havana and the nuclear-powered submarine to Havana along with it, and now what he's doing with regard to Venezuela is paying us back in our own coin. We threatened his near abroad. He is now threatening our near abroad. He's already nullified the Monroe Doctrine. He's nullifying it even further now with Venezuela. So we're saying we got to come home in order to push out China before we go after them in their own territory. And at the same time, we're saying we're going to stay with our allies in the South China Sea, the busiest sea in the world now in terms of shipping and economic flow across its surface and such. We're saying we're going to keep Japan and the Philippines and Korea and others in this alliance structure out there, and we're going to stay in the South China Sea. We didn't say anything about coming home from the South China Sea in order to have a forward presence so that when we do take China on, we can take them on from a position we think of strength rather than weakness. That's what this strategy is all about. It's focusing on China with a disguised concentration for the domestic audience on the Western Hemisphere. It's no such thing. It's China. It's all about China.
We know, Donald Trump said that I'm going to get back to the Western Hemisphere. He was talking about, somehow bringing the soldiers back home. But it doesn't seem that is the policy anymore.
This isn't about soldiers so much anyway. It's really about air forces and navies when you talk about China. It's not much about soldiers. My Marines had a cup they gave me when we graduated the last class. And the cup said around the circle on it, it said Marine Corps War College. And on the top, it said the shark and the tiger. And what that cup meant was the metaphor that we used in our exercises. The shark, the United States of America, Navy Air, can't go ashore and wouldn't dare go ashore in China. And the elephant or the bear, whatever you want to use for China, can't come into the sea because we will have attrited their Navy and their Air Force to the extent that most of what they left is their ground force. So what do you do then? Well, you go to nuclear weapons because you're not going ashore and you have not won. You have not won. You may have attrited their Air Force and their Navy, and they attrit ours significantly too. So we're both sitting there roughly in the perimeter of the South China Sea, and we both have had our air forces reduced by a third or more, and our ships reduced, and our subs reduced by a third or more. And we're looking at each other. If you will, picture it. We're in the South China Sea at maybe the -9 line. We don't dare go any further. They won't venture forth with their fleet because they'll lose more of them. They won't venture with their air any further than the -9 line. And so we're sitting there looking at each other. And I'll tell you what the lieutenant colonel or the colonel in the war game says at that point: we need to use nuclear weapons. And the civilian leaders in the war game will say, no, we're not going there. Well, we've got civilian leaders now that I'm not sure will say that. So we're talking about a nuclear conflict is what we're talking about. And as I've told you before, we've got people in the labs, young people, technically qualified to the max. We've got people in the Pentagon who are talking now about, for example, a first strike, riding out anything that retaliates and being alive afterwards and being victorious. We're talking about nuclear war as a tool of modern warfare. And that's what this leads to. That's what this strategy leads to.
But the problem is if the United States decides to go on some sort of preemptive attack, if they call it preemptive attack, and they do that, none of these countries gonna, sit aside and watch what's going on with the other. I'm talking about Russia and China. If they hit China, Russia is not gonna be quiet about it. They're
That's
not gonna be silent about it.
That's a part, I think, of Trump's rapprochement with Moscow, is to try to peel them away a bit. But read the strategy really closely. What we're going to do to China in our own hemisphere is get them out.
Mm.
That's what we want to do first and foremost. Did you know that every country in South America's trade last year was more with China than with the U.S.?
Exactly.
That's what they want to do. They want to get them out. That's the reason Rubio is going around trying to recruit leaders in South America. They want to root China out, root and branch out of the Western Hemisphere. Then they'll take them on. But this idea of being in the Western Hemisphere is all about fighting China in the Western Hemisphere. And for that matter, anybody else who wants to come in and take our place. But China is the preeminent power that's doing this.
How you can be the enemy of all these countries, and I don't understand it, Larry, because there has to be some sort of alternative for their policy, because so far I didn't see that would be much successful. Their attitude is not working. It's not resonating here in Brazil, at least.
When we took office in 2001, after that adumbrated transition because of the hanging Chad election, I'm talking about George W. Bush and Dick Cheney. When we took office, the president ordered us, the policy planning staff at the State Department under Richard Haas, to develop the new national security strategy. 2 years later, we still didn't have a national security strategy. You know why? Because everyone we wrote at the State Department and sent to Dr. Rice, the national security advisor, she refused to accept. So what did she do? After about 18 months, Haas got frustrated. So did we. She tasked her own staff on the National Security Council to write the national security strategy. She didn't like that either. You know what she did then? She contracted it out to a civilian group. What do you bet Trump and Hegseth did? Think Project 25. Think the Heritage Group. Think who actually wrote that national security strategy. Probably. That's my guess anyway. And just think of what they've been saying all along, what they've been doing both domestically and internationally. And you'll see that they have concluded, and rightfully so, that the number one, not narco-terrorism. Narco-terrorism is not a threat. The threat to the United States of America is the People's Republic of China, economically, militarily, socially, culturally, you name it, they're our threat. Now, your point is well taken. Mearsheimer and Walt don't have to be right. You know, the realists do not have to be right. There's nothing written in stone that they are right come hell or high water. We do not have to have a war. This Thucydides trap and all this crap about rising power, declining power, they will inevitably fight. Maybe once upon a time that was remotely true, but with nuclear weapons, we don't want it to be true. So yes, there is a way to keep from doing this. And it is not to try to challenge China every time they move anywhere at any time in any place. The way to do it is to accommodate. And I don't mean, people say, oh, well, that's what Neville Chamberlain did with Hitler. And look at what we got. I'm not talking about that kind of accommodation. I'm talking about accommodating the fact that power is waning from the West and going to the East, and dealing with that as empires have done throughout history when they had to do it. You continue and you make money. Your economy thrives. You deal with the potential enemy. He deals with you. You work things out diplomatically, economically, financially, and so forth. You don't go to war. There's nothing preordained about humans going to war except crass stupidity. And God knows there's plenty of that in the world.
Larry, do you see the ability or the possibility of the United States playing a charming role instead of putting pressure on other countries? Because that's the way that China behaves. They're looking for partners. They're looking for someone to work with.
Exactly.
How
Exactly.
is that going? Is there anybody concerned about this sort of attitude? Putting pressure, for example, here in Brazil, by putting pressure on Lula, what are they going to achieve? I see nothing coming out of this sort of policy.
You're absolutely right. They treat it as a zero-sum game. If they win, we lose. If we win, they lose. There's no one sitting down and saying, let's figure out a win-win situation. More often than not, that's accomplishable, where one person wins, another person wins a little, one person wins a lot, whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, good diplomacy means it comes out to where both have a reasonable standard of living, both have a reasonable opportunity to develop their own people in their own ways. This bullshit about liberal democracy should be thrown on the pits of fire. If China wants to run its country this way, and Russia wants to run its country this way, and Brazil wants to run its country this way, so be it. Who are we to say how other people run their states? Let's get along. And I'm not talking about kumbaya getting along. I'm talking about there are ways to design economies that makes them mutually reinforcing, not mutually antagonistic. But the latter is all we seem to be able to think about and do. And if one country is more GDP'd than another country, more purchasing parity capable than another country, so be it. Let's have some competition and see if we can't catch up. This being on the strategy that came out of the Bush administration said this, Nima, and this is just a follow on to it with different wrinkles. It said, we won the Cold War. We're the champions of the world. We're at the top of the mountain. Anything that stirs at the bottom of the mountain, a mouse, a rat, we're going to kill it. We're going to smash it. We'll either sanction it or use military force on it, or both. That's what we said. Didn't work very well. It didn't work very well at all. In fact, we've got more Al-Qaeda in the world right now as a result of the global war on terror than we had before 9/11. Yeah. There are more Al-Qaeda people on the earth now than there were before 9/11. It just doesn't work. But we don't seem to know this. We don't seem to know how to deal with people in the world like we had to for about 150 plus years when we weren't the big dude on the block. We did it fairly well. We dealt with the French Empire, the British Empire, the Spanish Empire, the Russian Empire, and we got along pretty well. Now we're the dominant empire and we can't get along with anybody. That makes very little sense, except that that's the way Yankees usually do.
Somehow it feels that they don't care about Latin America. They don't see anybody relevant in Latin America.
Look at what they're doing.
It's usually dangerous, Larry, in my opinion.
No, you're right. Look at. I was talking with people yesterday about this. We've got all this mess down there in Puerto Rico. We've got a mess in Jamaica. We've got a mess in Cuba. We got a mess from that Melissa and other hurricanes that preceded that. And what are we doing? We're putting troops on Puerto Rico to threaten Venezuela. This is absurd. Even George W. Bush in 2003, when BAM was hit by an earthquake in Iran, 30,000 people died, 200,000 people were injured. We sent search dogs, fire trucks. We sent food. We sent water. We sent everything we could over there because it was a humanitarian disaster. Well, we got a Caribbean replete with humanitarian disasters right now. In Santiago de Cuba, 15,000 roofs were blown off. No one has a home they can live in. It's incredible. And Jamaica's not much better off in certain areas too. And what are we doing? We don't know how to live in the world, Nima. And in our own hemisphere, we don't know how to treat the people who live in our area.
Here is, Larry, what Donald Trump said about Maduro.
Days are numbered and that the U.S. could soon strike Venezuelan territory. Could we see American troops on the ground in Venezuela?
I don't comment on that. I wouldn't say that one way or the other. I can say this, that he sent us millions of people, many from prisons, many drug dealers and drug lords, and mental institution, people in mental institutions. He sent them into our country where we have a well, we had a very stupid president. You know that. Biden's a low IQ person, especially nowadays. I mean, he was low IQ 30 years ago, but he was especially low IQ now. And what he did to our country is not good. Tren de Aragua, the gangs, one of the meanest gangs in the world.
You've locked down the border
No,
now.
he sent a lot of these people. He also sends in a lot of drugs. So we'll see how it all works out.
So
But
do you
I
wanna
can't talk about
So
strategy.
how far would you?
It's all about Biden.
There is about as much threat to the United States from narco-terrorists, as he has coined it, and Hegseth has made it a term of art, as there is from the Gulf of Mexico mounting an avalanche across Texas and going to the Canadian border. I mean, this is absurd. It's what George W. Bush did, but at least George W. Bush had some justification, you could say. 3,000 Americans were dead, billions of dollars of damage done, and all by a bunch of Al-Qaeda terrorists who flew airplanes. Most of that was our fault, by the way. But nonetheless, they did damage, and he had his rage up, and he had to do something. This is absurd. All the things that he just said about Venezuela or anyone in the world being responsible for all these kinds of nasty people coming into the United States and doing all this stuff is just absurd. Yeah, there's some bad people who got in, MS-13, things like that, gangs. If you put them all in a package and said, okay, how much of a threat does this really mount toward the United States of America? It'd be less than 0.001%. It wouldn't even measure on the Richter scale, as it were. And yet we're making everything out of it. We're making a mountain out of a molehill, in other words. But we did the same thing in my administration with terrorism. We told George W. Bush, you can't use the military instrument against these people. You will make them warriors. We've dealt with these people in the past with law, with the legal regime. We've put them in jail where they belong. They're criminals. They're not warriors. What did we do? We made them warriors. We made them such warriors, Neiman, that we went to Syria and allied ourselves with them and tried to overthrow Assad using them, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and so forth. So this is just stupid. It's just stupid to the maximum to take the military instrument and apply it against something that is amorphous and is not really a threat in a significant way, as we're doing now. Look at what it's led to. It's led to maximum violations of international law, violations of our own Constitution, our own domestic law, violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and it's leading to a contamination of our armed forces, because you see now so many people of flag rank going along with this. Every one of them should be standing up and being counted right now. Every one of them. And they're not. Just like they didn't at Quantico at that meeting. They just stayed stonily silent. Well, stone cold silence is not what we need now. What we need is people saying, this is against the law and I will not do it, upon forfeiture of my rank and my future in the military if necessary, but I will not do it. Do you see many doing that? Got one admiral, apparently, one admiral, the admiral at Southern Command, who's leaving now in December, sometime I'm told in December. And I'm told now with clarity, I think, that the reason he's leaving is because of this mess of killing people on the high seas without any real due process. This is death by 1,000 blows. We're weaving our own death shroud. That's what we're doing. And Trump is the master weaver. And that's pitiful. That is absolutely pitiful, because he came in and was elected to be the exact opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see no identity in Pete Hegseth. I see someone that can, change like it, the winds goes from the left to the right, he changes as
he goes with Trump. If you look at the two major cabinet officers, Rubio on one side and Hegseth on the other, they are the two principal cabinet officers in the American hierarchy. Secretary of State has first precedence, Secretary of Defense second. And the Secretary of Defense also carries the burden of being the executor of the president's wishes as commander-in-chief. So he's very much in the military chain of command. So you look at these two people. Right now, what you see on the one hand is a neoconservative whom Trump is very scared of and wishes to neutralize if he can. That's one reason he brought him in to be national security advisor, to be a little closer. The other one is a sycophant par excellence. You watch him, he's listening to the president's every word to make sure he doesn't violate that word and to make sure that what he says next is going to be in consonance with what Trump said. That's hard with Trump, increasingly hard, because he's apt to change his mind from 1 minute to the next, as that 3 December and then the 8 December interview showed. I didn't say that. You're lying. Get her out of here. She's not a good reporter. Get her out of here. So the Hexat's got to keep up with that. And he hasn't got very much mental power to assist him in keeping up with it. So what we have in essence today, Nima, is we have maybe at best a captain, I think it better a second lieutenant, running the largest military establishment in terms of money on the face of the earth. $1 trillion they're going for now. $1 trillion they're looking to get for this establishment. Congress even plussed up what the Trump administration asked for. They added some billions to it also. The NDAA right now is 3,000 plus pages. No one can read it. And yet they're going to flush that thing through, and the pipes are going to open for Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and all the rest of them. I'm sorry, RTX. And we're going to be off to another year of just disaster in terms of polluting the Pentagon with too much money amongst a bunch of general officers who couldn't find their ass in a windstorm. This is horrible. And we're pontificating all these strategies out there that are going to, because of our size, Nima, and because of the money behind that size, however in debt it is, we're going to hurt a lot of people. We're going to hurt a hell of a lot of people in South America, in the Caribbean, in the Pacific, maybe elsewhere. We're going to hurt a lot of people. Look at how many people we've hurt in Ukraine. This did not have to happen in Ukraine. And I don't blame Putin. I do not blame Putin. He had patience that Job didn't have. He stayed with it for years as we did it and did it and did it and did it. And then when he saw after 2014 that we were using those excuses again to rearm and retrain and train and arm Ukraine, he gave up and started this special military operation, which he is describing now perfectly correctly as not a war. You can't tell that to the people who are dying, of course, but it's not a war in the Clausewitzian sense. It's a small operation to make sure that his near abroad is not threatened by the United States of America and secondarily by NATO. That's all he's doing. Until he clears that threat out, he's not going to be content. And he said exactly what the cost of clearing that threat is. It is the cost of the territory he has taken to this point, and you hesitate much longer, and I'll put Odessa and the whole Dnieper River Valley in there. And you won't even be able to even ship anything, let alone get it to a port. And okay, Europe, tell me you're going to defy that. Tell me you're going to do things. What you're risking is war, and I'll beat the crap out of you too. But the problem there, of course, is that you may wind up with a situation that leads to nuclear weapons for sure.
Larry, in Doha, there was a summit in Doha talking about the situation in the Middle East, and there was a European analyst there I don't know if you saw the panel in which Tirita Parsi was talking with.
I saw part of it. Yeah.
Zarif and
yeah,
the lady from Europe. If I'm not mistaken, she was Italian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. I can't remember her name, but I think you're right.
Yeah. And she said something, somehow it's amazing to me that after 4 years of the conflict in Ukraine, you call Ukraine as the first priority for Europe. Who made that decision why is Ukraine is the priority, the first priority? Is that so much vital to the future of Europe? They're not part of the EU, they're not part of NATO, and Ukraine was part of Russia, historically is part of Russia. It's becoming the Europe's biggest problem right now. Who's deciding about it?
It's a product of what I call hubris, and also fooling yourself. And what I mean by that is the Europeans have gotten to a point where they were so accustomed to, graphically put, sucking off the tit of the United States that they thought everything within the domain suggested by that relationship was possible. All of a sudden, they were challenged and checked. And at the same time, they got a president who really felt he was vested in Ukraine, Joe Biden. And people around him, I think Blinken and Sullivan were more responsible than Biden, because I think Biden was checked out last couple of years. But whatever the personnel chemistry was and the people doing this, they thought that together they could take care of a Russia that, and here's the kicker, their intelligence agencies and their military were telling them was a paper tiger, to use the phrase that Putin found so interesting. Then they discovered that in the whole thing, the paper tiger was NATO. So then they got to lean back on the United States again. That leaning helped for a while, but then all of a sudden we got Trump and we got the movement away from Ukraine. He should have done this a lot quicker. He should have done this really sharply and fast, caught them off guard and done it. Now he's given them the chance in the interlude to mess with things. They are so vested. They are so invested in, and I'm talking about the EU, NATO, and the European countries singularly. They are so invested in this now that it's part, and this is something people have a hard time understanding. I did too until I got to the highest levels of decision making. They are so invested now that they can't back up. They cannot back up. You need to get rid of them. You need to get rid of all of them, because they are so invested in failure that all they can do politically and otherwise is reinforce that failure. No matter that they can see the train coming down the track at them, they are going. Mertz is a perfect example. He comes from BlackRock. Ooh, he's thinking about the future, and the future as seen through the lens of BlackRock. And the future is seen through what he expected to do with Germany, which was probably to elevate it quite a bit from where it is right now. He's seeing that going out the window. And so he's desperate. Macron's desperate. Macron's whole reputation is in tatters. Starmer is the least liked prime minister in Britain's history, as far as I'm concerned. And the stats pretty much show that. So they're all invested in enormous failure. All they know how to do is double down and triple down. That's all they know. It's like holding on to a great white shark that at any moment may stop swimming and turn around and eat you. You don't know how to turn loose. You can't turn loose. He's your shark. You made him. You built him. You paid for him. You elected him. You did whatever it took to put him in that ocean, dragging you. You can't turn him loose. So it needs to be a clean slate. They need to throw all these people out and start over again in Europe. And my fear is that they'll start in the 1930s rather than, say, the 1970s or 80s.
Yeah. Looking at the summit in Doha, in Qatar, you see a new Middle East, Larry. You see a new West Asia. You know, the talks they had, you know, the tone toward Israel. Even we had, you know.
I hope.
Yeah.
I hope. But I've seen this kind of thing before. I will admit, not quite as uniformly as we're seeing now. We're seeing more. And when that Omani foreign minister, I think it was, said the real problem in the region was Israel, he could have said, and the United States support for Israel. That would have made me happier. He wasn't going to say that, of course. Oman is one of the best diplomatic entities in the region.
Yeah.
And he wasn't going to say that. But that's what his intent was. Israel and the United States are the biggest perturbators, disturbers of the peace, if you will, in the region.
And as you mentioned, we had the former head of intelligence of Saudi Arabia, Turkey Al Faisal, talking about, this guy was somehow the worst, when it came to when it comes to Iran. When it came to Iran, he never was talking in a positive way about Iran. Right now, he's talking about this. The enemy is Israel, is not Iran.
I used to sit at the lunch table with Turkey Al Faisal. He'd be here, and what's his name from the Washington Post would be here, and David something, I can't remember his last name now. But David would be asking Faisal questions across my meal, and Faisal would be answering the questions. And I'm thinking at the time, I'm sitting beside probably one of the most bloody-minded men in the world on my right, and I'm sitting beside an idiot on my left. I shouldn't be at this lunch. But Faisal was. I mean, he was a typical Saudi. I don't describe Prince Bandar much different from that either. You never knew if Bandar or Faisal was your arch enemy, going to slit your throat on Monday morning, or was being honest and straightforward with you about the intelligence he was delivering. And you're saying he's changed now and he's in favor of some kind of rapprochement with Iran? And yeah, but I'd be very, very careful dealing with him, as I would with any Saudi. And that's not so much a stereotype as it is a stereotype. I'd be very careful about dealing with any Saudi, especially from the royals.
Again, we had Saudis together with Iranians, foreign minister of Iran, and Chinese coming together, considering that rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Larry, the other point is that you see some sort of hatred, growing hatred among, the Zionists, Laura Loomer, in, for example, in the United States toward Qatar. What is the threat that they're feeling coming from Qatar and the movement of I don't know how Qatar can be a threat to these people and how can they change the game against Israel. But there is something going on.
There's a genuine angst, and it was there much earlier than Trump with regard to Qatar, because they play a double and sometimes a triple or quadruple role. They'll be at one moment on Israel's side, so to speak, and the next moment they'll be doing secret talks with Hamas. Then the next moment they'll be on Hamas's side, and they'll be doing secret talks with Israel. And then the next moment they'll be against them both and fomenting things that will make both lose out in some way. So I'm stereotyping Arabs. I am stereotyping Arabs. If you've read much about the World War I, World War II situation in that region, the British and others who were their own worst enemies in many cases, but still, it is one of the most duplicitous groups that you can deal with. And so there's reason to have some angst on the part of the United States and some of its diplomats and some of its soldiers, Marines and others, with regard to Qatar and with regard to all of those countries: Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Little Sparta, Bahrain, where our Fifth Fleet is now. It's amazing to me that we have melded into that environment so conclusively, when for years, the early years of my military service, we held it at arm's length. There was no way we were going to get very close with any of those people. Now, the Saudis kind of wormed their way in with their money and all the arms they were buying and everything. So we watched that with some alarm. And we would talk about people who were military officers who had worked for more than one tour in Saudi Arabia. We'd talk about them in terms of, watch that person. That person's no longer trustworthy, because the Saudis knew how to capture them. It's true about the others too. And I saw that happen in Kuwait after we saved their butt. Remember, in the first Gulf War? I mean, I got mementos from Kuwait. I got dollar bills from Kuwait signed by the emir, all this kind of stuff. Yeah, they're your buddies. They're your friends. They got lots of money, but you got to be very, very careful because they're also duplicitous as hell. And that's just a characteristic. I'm not blaming them for being that way. It's a characteristic of living in the region they live in and a characteristic of living amongst the peoples that they have to live amongst, not least of which is us. Because, and let me hasten to add, the British Empire. The British Empire fouled that region up so badly that I'm not sure it'll ever recover in even this century. I remember what that CIA station chief in Beirut wrote back to Washington when we were haranguing him right after World War II. We were haranguing him about not watching the Soviets closely enough. And also, maybe you should watch the Lebanese a little better and the Saudis a little better. And he sent back and said, what the hell are you trying to tell me? The enemy out here is Britain trying to reestablish their empire. I mean, that was sincere. That was the truth. And incidentally, I think I told you, about a week later, he was on a plane, I think a C-47, flying somewhere in Africa, and it crashed and killed him. I'm not suggesting a connection, but
Larry, Israel is drafting U.S. pastors to influence the young people in the United States. They're talking about, they started with 1,000 Christian, pastors, and they want to reshape the public opinion in the United States. And here is,
and they know to whom to go. These corrupt Christians who don't know Jesus Christ from my left foot. That's who they go after. They don't go after true Christians. True Christians will have nothing to do with them. They go after the Christian nationalists. They go after the people like John Hagee's group, Christians United for Israel. They go after the Christians who aren't Christians. There are people like, for example, right now, Tucker Carlson reviles every day. They are not true Christians. And they're perfect allies for the Zionists. One of the most perfect allies is our ambassador there, Huckabee, who meets with Jonathan Pollard and probably had kind words for Jonathan Pollard. A traitor for money.
here is the report on that, Larry, on the
our moment. The question is whether we will rise to the occasion, and I can tell you from leaving this room a few minutes ago, we're going to rise to the occasion. We will not let this evil win this time.
Israeli leaders encourage the pastors to be bold and express gratitude for their support.
Stand up and be counted. Tell the truth. Speak to young people. Speak up and be counted. I'm counting on you, and I know you'll do what has to be done. That's what our destiny calls for.
This is not just Israel's fight. This is a fight for civilization. We're facing very much a civilizational struggle like we saw in the 30s between Nazism and the free world. Today, that Nazism is Islamism in coordination with communism, which today's expression is called woke, but it's the same thing.
Behind the scenes, Shira Mills of the Friends of Zion Museum helped make the summit possible.
Never been done before. This is something very unique, very difficult, but here we are. From my point of view, it's miraculous.
The vision going forward, recruiting 10,000 more pastors in the next 36 months.
Because there's a lot.
Yeah.
This is something I deal with almost every day as an advisory board member of the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. You wouldn't believe the things that we get and the things that we have to look at and the complaints we get from thousands of U.S. service members in all the services, including the health services and the merchant marine, about these people's attitudes toward them in the armed forces. These are poisonous people. These are people who carry Jesus on their forehead, but it's not the Jesus of the cross or the Sermon on the Mount. It's the Jesus that they have manufactured from the Old Testament, like Ted Cruz with Tucker Carlson. Jesus to them is a warrior with a flaming sword or an AR-15, and he wishes to kill all the people she just described in the world as being the enemies. Anyone who is not a Zionist, super radical Zionist, or a Christian nationalist deserves to die. They're not going to heaven, and why not get rid of them before Jesus has to come to the earth and get rid of them? That's their attitude. And we have, Nima, far too many of them in this country now.
Yeah.
I think we have one as the Secretary of Defense. I think he disguises this aspect of his personality rather well while he's Secretary of Defense, but I think he is one of these people. I think if it were his will to do it and his right to do it, he would make Christianity the national religion, and he would have the military assigned the mission of protecting that religion.
You know what they're doing? They're trying to single out Muslims together with socialists. They call it communists, and somehow doing a surgery, within the society, cutting some part of the society. But is that their audience, Larry, is the MAGA movement?
Some of them have departed, thank God. And I think more are going to depart. If you've watched some of those videos of Charlie Kirk, actually, to his credit, entertaining genuine questions from his audience and dealing with those questions, and sometimes being mightily chagrined on occasion about not convincing the individual asking the question that his response was better than his question. I mean, there were people who were telling him that he had no clothes on. There were young people telling him that the association with Israel was poisonous for the United States, and then describing the multiple reasons that was true, one of which was this alliance between zealot Christians and zealot Jews. They're losing. That's the reason they're doing this. And you're going to see a lot more of this, because they are losing for the first time in a long, long time, if not the first time, the youth in this country with regard to their affection for, dedication to, and loyalty to another country other than their own, Israel. They're losing them, and they're desperate. They are desperate. I get emails every day. I get emails telling me I should do this, I should do that, I should go here, I should go. Probably a dozen a day. They're desperate. They're trying to recruit. They're trying to stanch the wound. They're sticking their hand in the hole in the dike. But I think the flow of the water through that hole and other holes is getting too great that they're not going to be able to arrest it. I hope that's the case anyway, because it's very dangerous for us, as we're seeing with this Huckabee-Pollard meeting. That's unconscionable. He should have been called back. He should have been withdrawn from Israel. He should not be the ambassador anymore. And I fault Trump majorly for that. I fault him majorly for that. Huge mistake to allow that to go on and not take action.
I don't know if you watched Bernie Sanders talking about Larry Ellison. He's part of the picture, the big picture of what's going on with the Zionists in the United States. Here is what, here is what he said, Larry.
Another jerk who gave my kids computers that didn't work after about 6 months and cost us more money to get rid of than they did good in the first place.
Yeah, Bernie Sanders, here's what he said, Larry.
Foundations of democracy are under attack here in the United States and throughout the world. Will AI and robotics help make us become a freer, more democratic society? Or will it give even more power to the oligarchs who control the technology? Will AI result in a massive invasion of our privacy and our civil liberties? Larry Ellison, the second richest person on earth, predicted an AI-powered surveillance state where, quote, citizens will be on their best behavior because we're constantly recording and reporting everything that is going on, end of quote. This is the second wealthiest guy on earth, investing hundreds of billions in AI? Are we reaching the stage where every phone call that we make, every email and text that we send, every bit of research we do on the internet will be available to the owners of AI? And if that is the case, how do we sustain a democracy under those conditions? How do we protect our privacy?
All very good questions. Very topical, very important questions, suggesting, I think, rightfully, the danger we're in.
Yeah. You know, on Monday, I was talking with Larry Johnson. He mentioned that he was somehow discussing with, Grok, and with DeepSeek, these two engines, these two AI engines. He was discussing the war in Ukraine and the situation in the Middle East. He said that they're totally biased. They're trying to reshape, reorganize everything. They want to, inject something in you that it changes your beliefs. They're so powerful today in any aspect that you can imagine. It's not just about the wars and in everything. They're trying to, to reshape the whole society. I think what Bernie Sanders is talking about is so serious.
It is. It is. I go back to science fiction, which I think I've told you. I think science fiction writers, by and large, as a genre, actually are better than historians, and particularly about predicting the future. And if you look at some of the science fiction that's been written that posits this sort of future, whether it's Blade Runner or what was the one that Keanu Reeves did, The Matrix. If you look at them, I think you're looking at potential futures that these guys like Larry Ellison and others are designing for us, and that Bernie was just warning about. I think that's a very valid warning. These movies that we've watched and kind of laughed at and maybe had fun watching because all the science fiction and everything, the guns that kill everybody in sight and all of, I think they're more a predictor of the future than perhaps historians who take a look at that future and try to be calm and collected about it. The dimensions of what could be the change in the next 70 years, say to the end of this century, not to mention climate change, are quite staggering when you think about it. I saw a report today on actually what it was an index of exactly what has happened between the beginning of the COP series, the climate meetings, global climate meetings, and today, and where we are in terms of most, probably 83 to 84% of the climatologists and other scientists concerned in the world about it, where we are on their scale of imminent danger. And it's much worse than I thought. And these people there are people that could talk about this in great detail. And this is sort of subsumed in an index that tells us we don't have much time left. We really don't. And it's going to get really bad. It's going to get so bad that we're going to have difficulty living on this planet. And then you throw this into it and you say, okay, how are these billionaires like Ellison and Musk and Thiel and others, how are they going to confront this? Because some of these guys are still going to have their fortunes at their older ages and trying to stretch their lives out even further during this period. And it's not a good thought when you think about how they might use this and what comes along in technology, not to save the planet, not to do the things that should be done to make things better on the planet for the majority of people and to maintain some kind of democracy, but to save themselves and their client and their clients and their clique. That's what they'll do, just like rich people have done throughout history. And it's scary when you think about that, the technology, climate change, and the potential for nuclear war.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today. Great pleasure.
Kind of grim, but
yeah.
Well, I won't say you and I, but I certainly won't be here to see a lot of this, but my grandchildren will. And my one grandchild who has a job right now, making good money right out of college, she told me the other day that she's worried about her job going away because AI is taking over almost every aspect of it. So there you go, right there, right in my own family, it's already hitting. And I can't testify to the AI, not yet anyway, doing a better product, but it does it faster and cheaper, than the humans involved do. So I don't know. It's going to be a very exciting future in many ways.
Yeah, challenge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Your son will grow up into it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Larry.
Care.
See you on Friday.
See you on Friday. Yeah. Maybe we can talk about something nice on Friday.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
Is there anything nice? Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.